What's the fallout from a peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia? The US brokered the deal, giving it leverage and business opportunities. But will it hold? And what will Washington's growing presence in the South Caucasus mean for the region? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. There is a peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia after nearly 4 decades of conflict. The final stage was brokered by US President Donald Trump in the White House. Crucial to the deal is a corridor to connect the main part of Azerbaijan with another part of its territory, which is cut off because it's on the other side of Armenia. The deal will likely have an impact beyond the borders of the two main players. It's good news for Turkey, with potential for energy deals, but may undermine Russian and Iranian influence in the South Caucasus. But how long will it take before the corridor really becomes a reality? And can there be a lasting peace in the meantime? We'll put this to our guests in a moment. But first, this report from Imogen Kimber.
A handshake to seal the deal. Peace has been brokered at the White House between Azerbaijan and Armenia after nearly 4 decades of conflict.
Today, we have reached a significant milestone in Armenia-Azerbaijan relations. We're laying a foundation to write a better story than the one we had in the past.
The long-running dispute is about the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Although a major part of this deal is a corridor through Armenia to connect Azerbaijan with an isolated part of its territory. This was a sticking point in previous negotiations. It will be called
the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, which is a special transit area that will allow Azerbaijan to get full access to its territory of Nakhchivan while fully respecting Armenia's sovereignty.
The US will be instrumental in its creation.
Armenia is also creating an exclusive partnership with the United States to develop this corridor, which could extend for up to 99 years. And then they promise in 99 years they'll extend it, right? You'll promise.
Reportedly, US companies are already expressing interest in the work. Azerbaijan will also see a major upgrade in its diplomatic and trade relations with the US. And Trump has waived the aid restriction, which has been in place for decades.
We are writing a new history in a bilateral interstate relationship between the United States and Azerbaijan. We are starting the path towards a strategic partnership.
The conflict began in the late 1980s as the Soviet Union began to collapse and Azerbaijan moved to gain its independence. Nagorno-Karabakh, a region in Azerbaijan mostly populated by ethnic Armenians, broke away from Azerbaijan with support from Armenia. In 2020, Azerbaijan launched an offensive to regain the land, backed militarily by Turkey. A peace deal was brokered by Russia and maintained by its armed forces. But in 2023, Azerbaijan took back full control of the region, prompting nearly all of the area's 100,000 ethnic Armenians to flee to Armenia. International reaction has been mixed. For Turkey, the corridor may mean an increase in trade with oil and gas producing Azerbaijan, and so welcomes the deal. Russia says it welcomes the peace deal, but warns against foreign interference. Critics say it's a setback for Moscow's influence in the region. And Iran has condemned the corridor, which will be near its border with Armenia. This is not the first attempt at peace in the South Caucasus, but many hope this time it will last. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's discuss all of this further with our guests today. And in Baku, we have Vasif Huseynov, head of the Department of the Centre of Analysis for International Relations. In London, Jamila Mammadova, research assistant at the Henry Jackson Society, who specialises in the Caucasus region. And in Yerevan, Vahram Ter-Matevosyan, political analyst and professor of history at the American University of Armenia. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us today on Inside Story. Let me start with you then, Jamila. What do you make of this deal that is being trumpeted by Donald Trump? Is it a good deal, or at least the best deal possible?
Hello, James, and hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's certainly a deal which could hold, but that would depend on a few factors, such as the ability of neighboring countries, mainly Russia and Iran, to successfully interfere in the ongoing processes, such as, for example, the looming parliamentary elections in Armenia next year, and also Russia's ability to kind of manage its narratives around situation in Armenia within Armenia. Like most recently we have seen, for example, incidents between the Armenian church and the current government in Armenia. So I'm pretty sure in the next few months or perhaps weeks, we're going to see more of that. Iran obviously already announced its dissatisfaction with this particular route, and has to do with the long-standing trouble between Iran, and Azerbaijan. Although diplomatically things seem to be fine, but behind the scenes a lot is going on. Millions of Azerbaijanis are being oppressed in Iran. This has been happening for decades. We also know that Iran is pretty much against any Western presence at its border, which probably is going to happen in one way or the other if there's a deal.
Okay, I'd like to come back to Iran and the regional complexion a little later. But in terms of the two key countries that are involved, Armenia's Prime Minister welcomed it. Azerbaijan's president welcomed it. They both seem very, very happy. So let's go now to each of the two countries and see whether, in the opinion of our guests, that actually their leader's view is shared by most of the people. So let's first go to Vasif in Baku. What do people think of the deal that your leader has signed?
Yeah, many people, I would say almost everyone in Azerbaijan welcomed the Washington agreements. It is historic indeed for our countries, for the whole South Caucasus. What we achieved in Washington almost, of course, it is not a peace treaty, but we agreed on many specific issues which have been impossible until now to reach agreements on. Particularly the peace treaty. The text of the peace treaty has been already agreed upon, and the two leaders initialed the peace treaty, and it is going to be signed soon. There is some specific condition for the peace treaty to be signed. It is related with the territorial claims in the Armenian constitution against Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, until now, it was not possible for the Armenian side to remove territorial claims from its constitution, and Azerbaijan insists that it will sign the peace treaty only after the removal of territorial claims from the Armenian constitution. But nevertheless, in Washington, we agreed on something very important. The two countries finalized the peace treaty process. The two countries also jointly appealed to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, to dissolve the mediating institution that was established in the early 1990s and was dealing with the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That was one of the conditions of the Azerbaijani side to sign the peace treaty, because the OSCE Minsk group, which was dealing with the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict previously, is considered by the Azerbaijani side as the relic of the conflict. And that's why Baku was insisting that this institution has to be dissolved before the two countries sign a peace treaty.
Okay, that's the view then from Azerbaijan. Let's move to Yerevan, the capital of Armenia. Vahram, you are there. Your Prime Minister certainly was in favour of this deal, very enthusiastic about it. But I was interested to read that Mr. Pashinyan, one opinion poll put just 13% of Armenians say that they trust him. Does he represent his people, or are people more sceptical there?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about my take on this very important development. As Prime Minister of Armenia has rightly put it, it's a significant milestone. While one segment of Armenian society, influenced by the immediate effect, praised the deal, expressed excitement, and others are cautiously optimistic, I would say a significant number of Armenians, their reaction was more of a disappointment and disillusionment at the outcome of the event, long promoted in public discourse. In a wider scale, I think it was more of a confidence-building measure rather than a step towards establishing a lasting peace. Lasting peace arrives when peace is just, it is embraced by the majority of the people, and it is institutionalized. Yes, as you rightly mentioned, recent polls show that Pashinyan's ratings have plummeted. It is rightly, as you mentioned, it's 13%. And Pashinyan has a very hard job to do in the country to, first of all, prove that what he has achieved in Washington, it's going to be implemented. Second, the peace treaty is going to be finally signed, because what was signed in Washington was not a peace treaty. It was a declaration on a peace treaty, sort of starting the process, initialing the process. And there's a long road ahead. And one of the conditions, one of the major obstacles, as was rightly mentioned by my colleagues, is Azerbaijan's demand for Armenia to change its declaration, to change its constitution, especially the preamble of the constitution, which refers to the Declaration of Independence. Now, here the major obstacle comes to me, because that constitutional change amendment cannot happen overnight. The only way to change the constitution is to go to referendum. Until now, the draft of the new constitution is not ready yet. According to different estimations, it's going to be ready not anytime soon, and it is difficult to anticipate what could happen, what can happen by the time people go to the referendum. And I have to say that securing a referendum, the government needs at least 800,000 people who would go and support that. It is very difficult, given the public ratings of the prime minister. So I would be very cautiously optimistic about the road ahead. Here's where Armenia needs support of America, of the US and the European Union to really make sure that there is enough public support and Armenia is not completely marginalized. And if the deal doesn't go through, what could be the negative implications for the Armenian society and for the wider regional security?
OK, Jamila, let me just read you a quote from Donald Trump. 35 years of death and hatred, and now it's going to be love and success together. A typical Trumpian quote. And I don't want to belittle what has happened, but could you not make an argument that the real change, the thing that ended this intractable problem that's been there for so many years, didn't happen in the last few days. It happened in a military operation in 2023. That was what changed the big problem of a self-governing territory with an Armenian population inside the territory of Azerbaijan.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. Although it may seem that Trump is it may sound as a political stunt on Trump's behalf, we still have to evaluate what happened properly. And I think it's truly a geopolitical shift, what has happened. Now, of course, Azerbaijan and Armenia both contributed to such a development, no doubt about that. But with American backing, I think they have more leverage over the neighbors to start with, which is very important now that Russia is involved completely in its war in Ukraine, and it's basically has no capacity to turn its attention elsewhere. I think both leaders are very wisely trying to use this short-term, of course, historically speaking, a short-term possibility to kind of negotiate for the sake of peace and security in the region. So I'm not sure if this particular deal could have happened under the previous administration or previously, probably not. But what has been achieved yesterday, in my opinion, is truly a progress. Now it's down to both parties to kind of make sure that what has been written on a paper is realized And of course, with Americans bringing their companies to the region and direct investment, investing in areas such as communications, IT, I would say AI, and etc. Whatever we heard from both presidents at the conference yesterday, I think could make a significant difference. So let's wait and see what's going to happen in reality. But I think that the chances are there. It's just very important to probably follow what has been promised on paper. I think there is an agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia governments about the pathway forward. And if there are no external influences on the internal processes in both countries, and I think Armenia here is in a less beneficial position, unfortunately. But if everything goes well and the current governments in Armenia and Azerbaijan manage to make sure that this deal goes through, it will be certainly a major geopolitical shift, perhaps of the last three decades or so.
Vasif, let me talk about one of the key elements. And in a Trumpian way, there's a sort of property deal involved in this to an extent, which is this new corridor that is being built. Just explain to me why this corridor is needed, because your country is separated in two and there is actually no land connection between two parts of the country, yes?
Yes, the isolated part of the country, which is called Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic, was separated from Azerbaijan around 100 years ago. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic found it completely isolated and blockaded in the condition of the Armenia-Azerbaijan war. And since then, as we did not have any relations with Armenia, it was very difficult for the Azerbaijani side to reach its exclave, to reach its people who are living in Nakhchivan. We were using two roads, one through Iran, the other one through Georgia and Turkey, and it was very long. And the Iranian side was very often using that road as a leverage against Azerbaijan. So after the Second Karabakh War in 2020, Armenia and Azerbaijan agreed to open a road through the Armenian territory between mainland Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan exclave. And
Okay. I want to bring in Vahram at this point. Vahram, so the deal now is that this route is going to be run by the Americans. Again, a Trumpian flourish to this. It's being named after Trump. It's the Trump route for international peace and prosperity. It's about 50 kilometres slither of land in your territory, Armenia. Going to be run by the US for 99 years. A US company is going to run it. I mean, is that acceptable to Armenian people?
Well, we don't know the details of this arrangement. Many details are yet to emerge. I guess the government itself has many questions in mind. And the way the government responded to the criticism within Armenia, they also accepted. They don't know many details. They have yet to negotiate how this trip is going to play out. But one thing is certain. The U.S. management of trip would provide the Armenian government with sufficient cover to maintain the appearance of Armenian sovereignty over the route, because Armenia's position has been that no connection can be provided to Azerbaijan, which would jeopardize Armenia's territorial integrity, sovereignty, and jurisdiction over this route. So we don't know the details. We don't know the details whether Armenian customs and border controls will be the one who will check the passports of Azerbaijani citizens traveling from mainland Azerbaijan to Nakhchivan, and then what would happen next? Are they going to declare their goods? These are all questions that everybody in Armenia keeps asking, and I guess the government is yet to answer this question. And we won't have answers to this question in the coming weeks and months, I suppose, given the intensity of the event and also number of questions that are hanging in the air.
OK, I want to ask Jamila about questions that go wider than the two countries that are at the centre of this. I mean, if Armenia's relations with Azerbaijan get better and their borders start to open, they start to do trade, what does it mean for Armenia and Turkey, who also got blocked borders? And could that be very good news for the region?
Absolutely. I think almost automatically, if this breakthrough happens, then Armenia and Turkey will reopen the borders, which will open the way for international trade as well. So we're not talking just about Azerbaijan and Armenia trading between one another. It's much larger than just the region, and it's larger than the region of South Caucasus, if I may say so. We are talking about Central Asian vast resources, including hydrocarbons and critical minerals. And here in the West, there is a increased attention towards those resources. So I think, the potential is enormous here, as I've said. And I think if my colleague can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Armenian Prime Minister has been answering this question before regarding the sovereignty of Armenian territory. Nobody has claims to it. The Zangezur corridor, as we call it, it is still under Armenian supervision. It will be supervised by Armenia. There may be some agreements on the ground with the Americans, of course, but I think he made clear a few weeks ago that Armenia will maintain its sovereignty and independence. So there is no question here about any international interference or international manipulation of events on the ground. It's purely business.
Okay, Vasif, let's talk about two countries that might not like what's happening. Let me start with Russia. This was always seen as Russia's sphere of influence. Both Armenia and Azerbaijan were part of the Soviet Union. After the last major war, Russia was said to have had a diplomatic coup by bringing the peace and then sending lots of peacekeepers. Russia seems to have lost out here, does it not?
Yeah, absolutely. What's happening what happened in Washington and in the follow-up developments is very bad news for Russia's influence in the South Caucasus. Russia used to be the main honest broker here in the South Caucasus, particularly between Armenia and Azerbaijan as well. After the Second Karabakh War, it was Russia that put an end and managed to bring the two countries to ceasefire. And Russia was expecting that the peace treaty and all transportation issues are going to be resolved under its control with the involvement of Russia, and even the trip, the Zangezur corridor that's going to be opened under the control of the United States was supposed to be under the control of Russia, according to the agreements achieved following the Second Karabakh War. Therefore, Russians are very unhappy, and yesterday Russia's Minister of Foreign Affairs made a statement, expressed their concerns that the Zangezur corridor, the trip is supposed to be opened under the trilateral statements that have been reached between Armenia and Azerbaijan through the mediation of Russian side. So,
okay. Russia, though, in that statement you mention, is at least being diplomatic, perhaps because we know that there's a summit between President Putin and President Trump coming up in a matter of days. Vahram, Iran is not being diplomatic at all, is it? Ali Akbar Veliati, top advisor to the Supreme Leader, described this new corridor. He says it will not become a gateway for Trump's mercenaries. It'll become their graveyard. Why is Iran so upset?
Iran feels contained. Iran feels marginalized. And given the potential presence of some involvement of the U.S. in the region on its border, I think Iranian leaders have all the reasons to feel on edge. That being said, I think Iranian reaction, which implied that with or without Russia, they are going to make sure that this trip, as it is called, is not going to be implemented the way the signatories were hoping for. I don't know what that really entails. We have yet to see. But one thing that is really disturbing, and I think analysts will keep an eye on that, is that why Iran reacted in this way. Is it because the Armenian officials did not let them know in advance what was content, what was the essence of this deal? Or Iranian, there has been miscommunication. What was the reason for Iranian to react that way? Because Iranian leadership has been very vocal and very clear from 2020 that they were opposing Zangezur corridor in the Azerbaijani interpretation. If that was the case, now we see that it is not the Azerbaijani interpretation of the Zangezur corridor. It is a completely different setup. Why Iran reacted this way? Of course, the U.S. presence caused that reaction. But why and how a country that is quite close, that has been quite influential in the post-war environment, reacted that way? I hope there is a long road ahead of Armenian diplomacy to make sure that Iran feels confident that its interest with Armenia are not going to be, its border with Armenia is not going to be jeopardized, that Armenia will have sovereign rights and sovereign connection to Iranian border. So some job needs to be done with Iran. And this is where the homework of Armenian diplomacy lies ahead.
OK, Jamila, I'd like to end with what seems like a light-hearted point, but I don't think that's the way President Trump treats it. Both the Azerbaijan and Armenian leaders said they were going to nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. In your view, concerning this deal, does he deserve it? Because I think he seriously wants it.
Well, there is no question about whether President Trump wants it or not. Clearly he does. But again, I think we need to judge on the events. And again, it's a common work. It's a mutually important work. And I think that it's not just up to the President of the United States what's going to happen on the ground. And we've just discussed many reasons why. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think people in both countries certainly wish that was the case. So let's see whether it will indeed be the case.
Thank you very much to our guests today for explaining this complex but significant story. Vasif, Huseynov, Jamila Mammadova and Vahram Ter-Matevosyan. Remember, this programme is broadcast every day, not just on television. You can watch it anytime you want on YouTube or on our website, aljazeera.com. We welcome your views and comments too. Go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Alternatively, message us on X, where we are at AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it from me, James Bays. From all the team here, keep yourself safe and well. Bye-bye for now.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.